So for this tutorial, what we're going to do, we're going to discuss a few functions that relate to an instrument in Logic, which is called the EXS24, which is in fact a virtual sampler. What we're going to discuss today obviously relates to Logic. However, a sampler, a virtual instrument sampler, works very much the same in any other platform such as Pro Tools, Ableton Live, Cubase, and whatever else. Okay, so the cool thing with the sampler is the fact that it allows you to import a range of audio samples, and you can play them back on your MIDI controller keyboard. So we're going to have a look at the sampler, how it works in a couple of different ways. But first of all, what I've got here, I've got the sample of a guitar feedback. Let's have a quick listen. Okay, that's a pretty cool sound, and the reason why I want to use this sound is because I want to turn it into perhaps a some sort of like a patch, okay, that I can play with my MIDI controller keyboard. So essentially, that sound is going to be spread out across the entire keyboard range, and it will play at different pitches, okay. So, which means that I need to import this sound into the sampler. All right, and here how it's done. So I'm just gonna, number one, I'm gonna create a new track, okay, and in the software instrument track, I'm gonna select the EXS24 sampler. Okay, you can see that you've got mono, stereo, multi-output, and 5.1. Multi-output is a really good function, okay, but for the purpose of what we're doing at the moment, we're just simply gonna select stereo. And that's that. And then click on create. And up it comes. All right, let me just sort of resize it a little bit. Let me just make it a bit smaller. Okay. Right. So essentially, the way the EXS24 sampler works, or it actually as it happens, any sampler, right? It has exactly the same features as a standard synthesizer. Okay. You've got your filters. Okay. High pass, low pass, and band rejects with your cutoff and resonance and so on. You also have your envelopes, envelope 1 and envelope 2. You've got LFOs and etc. etc. The only difference that differentiates a synthesizer from a sampler is the fact that a sampler does not have an oscillator. Okay, which means that an oscillator is in fact a device that generates a sound. Okay, so the sound itself is in fact generated by an audio sample. Okay, which means that we need to import this feedback sound into the sampler. Okay, well, let's do that. So I simply click on the Edit button. Okay, and you end up with this panel. Okay, now the next thing that I need to do, I simply select the audio sample and drag it into the sampler. And that is that. All right, that's how you do it. Easy as that. Now you can see that the actual sample has been spread across the entire keyboard range. So this blue line means the range of the sample. So obviously it's C2, which is going to sound really, really low, and G8, which is going to sound really, really high. So it tells you right there, okay, it says that the key where the original sample is going to be triggered from is the C3. So if I now play C3, I should actually hear the original sample. Okay, so if I play the C2, obviously it's going to be an octave lower. And if I play the C4, it's going to be an octave higher. And so on. Okay, there's a whole bunch of other stuff here that we could possibly look at, but for the moment, let's stick to what we've got. Okay, simply just drag the sample into the sampler, and that is that. All right, now the next thing that you need to do, once you actually close this window, Logic will ask you, do you want to save this sampler? And of course you need to. So if you click on save, and then I'm going to call that feedback 1, All right, and then click on save, and that's it. All right, now that I've done that, the EXS24 has in fact created a new preset, which is called Feedback 1. Now that I've done that, I can simply just hit a note on my MIDI controller keyboard, and this is it. So that's my original sample that I'm playing. Okay. So if I play a note, and so on. Okay. However, the sound itself, it's a bit boring. As soon as I let go of the key, the sound stops and so on. Well, all that is actually dictated by your envelope. Okay. So envelope 2 is directly linked to the output. Okay. So which is there. This is your output. Okay. So envelope 2 is directly linked to the output, which means that if I sort of adjust those faders in the of envelope 2, they will affect the sound that comes out of the output. Okay, so imagine that I want to create some sort of pad, some sort of eerie type of sound. Okay, things that I could possibly do, I can simply increase the attack, which means that the sound is going to take some time before it reaches an audible level. And what I'm going to do, I'm going to increase the release, okay, which means that the sound will carry on when I take my finger off the key. Let's have a quick listen. Okay, this sound already starting to sound quite interesting. Okay, and I really haven't done a great deal. Okay, other things that I could possibly do to my sample. What about if we sort of start playing around with the filters? Okay, so you need to turn the filter on, just like that. Okay, so I may just sort of add a little bit of drive. All right, maybe turn a bit more. Okay, and now that you've got that, you can sort of start having a listen, see what it sounds like if you add a bit of resonance, perhaps. Okay, at the moment we've got a low pass filter. Saying that, you can try maybe a high pass filter, see what it sounds like. I prefer the low pass filter, actually, to be honest. Okay, and that's that. So at the moment I'm literally just playing some notes. Okay, definitely spooky. See what it sounds like if I play a chord. For example, at the moment I'm going to play like a what appears to be a C minor 7. B flat. G minor. And so on. Okay, so it actually starts sounding okay even if I play a chord. All right, so doing stuff like that, it kind of allows you to use, dare I say, found sound in order to sort of come up with your own interesting sounds for the purpose of sound design. Okay. So, and by the way, things that you could do, you can just go ahead and grab your phone and then sort of start recording things. There's a whole bunch of sounds out there that are waiting to be discovered. So you can just use your phone and record stuff and then import it into your computer. And, and you can import it into the sampler and just sort of come up with stuff like that, okay? So other things that you could possibly look at, for example, down here, you've got what it's called the matrix, okay? which means that you can sort of, it's the same, the matrix looks exactly the same as the matrix in the ES2 virtual instruments. So imagine that you wanted to sort of add some LFO to your sounds. LFO stands for low frequency oscillator. And at the moment we've got 3 LFOs. We've got LFO1, LFO2, and LFO3, right? Imagine that, and they all kind of do slightly different things, right? So imagine that I want to maybe sync the pitch of this sound to LFO2, okay? So imagine if I want to do that, or maybe even, I tell you what, even the cutoff frequency filter. Okay, see what it sounds like. So destination, I'm just going to go filter cutoff. Okay, filter cutoff, and the source is going to be LFO2. Okay. Now what's going to happen is this. Essentially, the LFO2, okay, is going to affect the cutoff frequency filter by a certain amount. All right. So this green button, this green triangle right here indicates the intensity of the LFO. Indicates how much of the LFO is going to be audible. Okay. At the moment, if I press a key, nothing's happening. However, if I turn this up, you can definitely hear that the filter, that's this low frequency oscillator is affecting the filter. Just going to turn it up a bit more just for the purpose of the demonstration, and I'm going to crank the LFO up a little bit. Okay, perhaps even faster. Okay, so essentially what the LFO is doing is sort of modulating the sound, modulating the filter according to its frequency. At the moment, the frequency of this LFO is 7 hertz, okay, or 7.7 hertz, right? You can actually turn it up a bit higher, which means that it's going to sound really, really fast, or really slow. Okay, cool thing with LFO2 is you can also sync it to the clock, to the metronome, I mean, sorry, which means that at the moment it's playing quarter note or 8 notes and so on. And you can change the waveform as well, by the way, and so on. All right, so there's a whole bunch of stuff that you can do with that. And that's it. All right. So other things that the destination, instead of being the cutoff frequency filter, could possibly be, God knows, the pitch. Let's have a listen, see what it sounds like. Okay, so now the LFO is actually modulating the pitch. Okay, in whichever sort of amount you want. Okay. Kind of spooky, all right? And that's it. Okay, so that's one thing that you can do. Let me just sort of turn this down a little bit to begin with. Other things that you could possibly do, by the way, of course, you can, you know, maybe if you wanted to have, you know, you can actually have some, maybe some reverb, perhaps, to actually emphasize the sound a bit more. You know, let's go ahead and maybe just grab some, I don't know, weird space. Imagine that's a... There you have it. See what it sounds like down low. Pretty cool. Sounds like a spaceship. All right, that's one thing that you can do with your sampler. All right, what else could you possibly do? Now, what I've got right here, I've got a okay. What I've got right here, I've got a whole bunch of samples that are recorded, and essentially, and they sound like this. They've already been edited and cut up. So, but I've got something like that. Okay, so one day I just went out and with my phone, I just recorded like a whole lot of sounds. I had a drumstick and just hit like a whole bunch of objects that I've found on the street. Like a skip bin or a tin can, and I found a building site, and I just went in there and I just kind of sort of started to hit objects and so on. Imported all the samples into Logic, cut them all up, and this is what they sound like. All right, so imagine that now what I want to do, I want to create a percussion kit using the sampler, which means that I want to import all the sounds that I've got right here, right, into my EXS24 sampler. All right, and this is how you do it, really easy. Again, I'm going to create a new virtual instrument track, okay? Software instrument is going to be the EXS24 sampler, and then click on create. All right. Now what I'm going to do next, I simply again click on the edit button, just like that. Now I'm going to go ahead and find where all my samples are. They're all right here. I'm going to select them all using Command A, right? Command A, and then simply drag the samples into the sampler. It says, one more time. All right, so documents, sorry. Metal samples, Command A, and then click and drag, and off I go. All right, so it says right here, adding 37 samples. Well, what I want to do, I want to select contiguous zones, right? Which means that the samples, the starting note is C1, okay? And then the next sample is going to be C sharp. The next sample again is going to be D. The next sample again is going to be D sharp, then E, and so on. And then click OK. All right, and that's it. Cool. Now that I've got that, all my samples are in fact placed from C1. And so on, okay? Cool. Now that I can do that, now that I've done that, I simply, again, close this window and says, do you want to save it? Yes, I do. Click on Save. And then it says, where do you want to save it? I want to save it in the Sampler Instruments folder. And then call that Junk Yard 2. Click on Enter, and that's that. Lovely. Now that I've got that, all right, all my samples are now placed across the entire keyboard range. Okay, which means that now what I can do, I can create some sort of percussion sort of groove. Okay, well, let's have a listen. Let's try, see what we can come up with. So I'm going to create like a two bars range. I'm going to zoom in a bit. Okay, then put the click on, and then hit the record button, and off I go. 2, 3, 4. And that's it, okay? So once you've done that, you know, you can do all sorts of different things. You know, if you wish, you can kind of go and maybe just apply some filters. Maybe you can sort of add some effects, for example. Let's go and find some, that Big Crusher. I always like Big Crusher for some reason. I don't know, some rough crunch, whatever that may be. A bit much. Bit of reverb, maybe. Bit much. And that's it. Okay, so now that you've got that, see what it sounds like once we actually add our feedback sample that we already had. And there you have it. That's your sort of crazy chase scene for a horror movie, for example. Something that can be used for you know, like a whole range of different applications. The last thing is this: when you save your project, when you save your project, you need to go to File and then let's go Save As. Okay, this is really important. It says right there, copy the following files into your project. You need to copy all your files if you've got any. The other thing that you need to make sure that you tick is in fact EXS instruments and samples. Okay? If you do not include the EXS instruments and samples, then the next time that you reopen Logic, or if you share this your project with someone else, then your samples and the EXS instruments, they're not going to be included in your project. Okay, so it's important that you also include that, EXS instruments and samples. On the subject, if you happen to work with movie files, for instance, you may need to click that as well. All right, and that's it. All right, then you click on Save. Replace it, and that is that. All right, so that's how you use the EXS24 sampler in Logic. Have a great day.